Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Audietis. This episode of Nos Audietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Audietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A sideline fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola Dero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going to
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
That Porter says cheated.
We want to win. This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Audietis. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is friend of the show and Sounder at Heart contributor, but more importantly, LA Galaxy expert, Ryan Rosenblatt. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
You know, better than we were doing on Monday morning. So, you know, we'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, I know this whole not always winning thing is still relatively new to you guys. So
Yeah.
Welcome to the world.
Yeah, I don't know how other fans deal with this. Like it's I like this whole year, this last few weeks I've been contemplating like, okay, it's one thing to have to talk about this stuff early in the season, but if we're in the summer and it's really off the rails, like what do you even how do you fill your time?
Yeah, I mean, and at this point also, like you've got what, 3 more months before you can even sign anyone else too. Like now that transfer window's closed, you're like, this is what we got.
That's it, exactly. I know there's not even a lot of like fun discourse about like how to change things. But it's not that case for the Galaxy these days. The loss last week to Austin notwithstanding, this is continued to be a really fun season, even if it hasn't been all, you know, puppies and unicorns. It's still a fun. There's a lot of there's something to talk about. There's something positive. There's real momentum building with the Galaxy. What have we learned anything about the Galaxy since the last time the Sounders and Galaxy met about, you know, a month and change ago?
I don't think there's really anything new that we've learned. I think it reinforced kind of where we were. What was it? End of March, I think, when they played. Yeah. It's reinforced a lot of things. And I think last week kind of it was funny because it was a combination of at halftime we're like, oh, okay, we've looked terrible, but like we can turn this around. Like there was an actual optimism, which, you know, in the last few years when we looked terrible in the first half, we're like, well, that's probably because we're terrible. Right. So like that was pretty cool. And then even after the game, like we were sitting there and I'm like, well, that game sucked. Like, but it didn't sound any alarm bells. It wasn't like, oh, we suck now. I was like, well, you know, sometimes you go and you put in a stinker. And I mean, losing 3 points away from home, it happens. Like, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And I'm just, you know, it was kind of one of those, you know, it happens. And it's refreshing to have. I mean, this is a flawed team still. That this is not a team that is going to run over the league. We are not the Columbus Crew. But it is nice to kind of just walk away from a game being like, yeah, we're still a pretty good team.
Well, let's talk about some of those flaws before we shower you with too much praise. The knock against the Galaxy going into the last Seattle game was that the defense was a little suspect. I don't know that we have learned anything to counter that. As it is, their shutout of the Sounders remains their only shutout of the season, and they have given up. You know, they lost 2-1 to LAFC. They had the 3-1 win over Vancouver, the 4-3 win over the Earthquakes, which was actually a much more kind of a wild game, even more than maybe the score suggests. And of course, the 2-0 loss to Austin last week. But what is the where are the flaws in this defense? It's not just set piece defending where they've given up 7 goals, right?
Yeah, set piece defending is abysmal. So like that, there's really no way around that. But even from open play, I mean, this is, I think, pretty clearly at least the worst defense in the West right now. But you take away set pieces, and I think from open play, they're merely a bad defense. So like set pieces is a big part of this. That takes a bad defense to the worst defense. But it's not as if you take away set pieces and everything's going great. And I mean, the set pieces stuff it's a little bit more complicated in terms of how are you setting up? Are you tracking markers? You get a lot of coaching stuff there. But from open play, I think a lot of it comes down to one, the nature of the team, the system they play is going to leave that back line exposed some of the time. So that they're always going to be a team that it has a propensity to give up chances. And then they just have, in particular, center backs that don't move super great. And that doesn't mean that they're not good. I think Yoshida and Caceres and Neal came back last week. I think they all have their merits as defenders. I don't think the problem is they have bad center backs, but none of them are great movers. And when you're pairing two relatively immobile center backs, whatever pairing of that you want to take, in a system like this where they get run at and they're exposed a little bit, it's a really bad combination. I think you see that time in and time out.
So one of the changes or one of the upgrades maybe to the defense for the Galaxy in this one is, I believe last time the Sounders played, Gaston Brugman came off the bench, but he's been everything you expected of it. I mean, he's back now fully, right?
Yeah, he's back and he's a very reliable player. And that's kind of what you want. And I mean, we've seen this for years in MLS. If you have a really reliable 6, it really just changes everything for you. And cuts out so many of those chances. And that's just kind of what he is. You put him at the base of that midfield, and all of a sudden, every 10 chances now becomes every 7 chances. And just the ability to stop. And a lot of that isn't even necessarily winning the ball, but it's just being there when the other team is in transition and making them turn around or making them play the ball out wide that slows them down. He's great at that. And then he is also good at picking up the ball and getting it out from his feet quickly to start something the other way. But more than anything, especially with those center backs, it's how can they make opposing teams in transition turn around? How can they make them hesitate for 2 or 3 seconds before they keep playing it? And he's been great at that.
And so one of the other areas that they have maybe addressed might not be a factor this one, or in this game. Right before the transfer window closed, Galaxy picked up Carlos Garces. He's a 20-year-old Colombian center back. Do you know anything about this guy, or is this a longer term project that probably doesn't factor into this one?
I mean, I haven't watched him play, and I mean, I've looked at the stats on him, but I do not watch the Colombian League week in, week out. Weirdly. So I can only say so much. But based on the descriptions of him and the stats, he really does come across as an ideal fit for what this team is, because he's a younger defender, and by all accounts, he's very mobile. And so when you talk about the Galaxy just not having really mobile center backs, theoretically he fits that, and he gives you someone who can cover more ground, who can run, who can take away some of those balls over the top, and pairs well with one of the other 3 center backs in a really, really nice way. And so I think that is going to go a long way. I hope that, he's actually good. I can't speak to how good he is. The reports on him are nice. The stats look pretty nice. We'll see how good he looks. Greg Vanney has said that they want to bring him along slowly, which makes sense for, a 22-year-old coming over from Colombia. Yesterday, I believe, was his first training session, and they had him train with the second team. And today he got his first training session with the first team. So I don't expect him to play this weekend. But when we look towards the summer, when we look to the fall and hopefully the playoffs, that's a guy where I think the Galaxy realistically can help or expect a big improvement in their defense just because of profile. And that's really encouraging because, the Galaxy have done a very bad job for years self-scouting and figuring out what are they missing and then adequately targeting someone who fits that. And I don't know how good Garces is, but they have clearly identified what that defense is missing in terms of skill set. And they have signed a player who, at least in profile, has that skill set. So I hope he's actually good. If nothing else, though, I'm encouraged to see the team finally knows what they lack, because that's been a thing the Galaxy hasn't had in the last few years.
And I would imagine they sort of envision him pairing with Jalen Neal over a sort of a long stretch, and Neal is also still out, right?
Neal came back last week, so
He did.
so he came back last week, and so that's really encouraging too, because in addition to my concerns with just the profile of center backs that the Galaxy have, the reality is because Neal was out and Garces wasn't in yet, they really only had two center backs in Yoshida and Caceres. And when one of them was out, which happens sometimes because both of them are old, they had to bring in a Zavaleta, and their depth was a real problem. And I think that is also a degree to why they've struggled defensively. They were playing center backs who frankly aren't very good. And my issues with, is Neal a great partner for Yoshida? Is Neal a great partner for Caceres? We'll see what Garces gives the team. If nothing else, if Garces is good, which, you would think he is considering the outlay, you at least now have four good center backs, which is a big difference from only having two good center backs.
And so who are you expecting to start this weekend? Neal and Yoshida?
It'll be interesting because last week at least Neal was on the bench to begin with, and then
at halftime or something.
Yeah, and he came in at halftime, and as soon as he did, the defense looked a lot better. Now part of that is game state, and they were down 2-0, and so Austin was sitting further back. So whether or not who he comes in for, or whether or not they start him, I'm not entirely clear. That we'll see. And also, he's just back and he's a younger player. So I wouldn't be shocked if they put him on the bench again. But I also wouldn't be shocked if he starts. And he came in for Caceres at halftime. So, you would think then if he does start this weekend, it'd be him with Yoshida and Caceres on the bench. But, first game back, he only played 45 minutes. We'll see.
Well, let's flip the page over to the offense, which is, obviously the part of this team that everyone talks about, and for good reason. Galaxy have been the, maybe the best offensive team in the league this year, scoring tons of goals. They have 21 goals so far, but they will be missing a couple key pieces. Ricky Puig is out with yellow card accumulation, and is it Dejan Joveljic? Is that
Dejan, technically? Dejan, okay. Dejan
Joveljic. All right. So he missed the first game with the Sounders. Twins missed this game as well. He has some sort of injury, I guess, right?
Yeah, he's had this same injury for a few weeks now, and he missed last week. He did also, he missed that game against the Sounders last time. He came back. He missed last week. It sounds like he'll probably miss one more after this one.
So of course, they still have Joseph Paintsil, who is maybe a dark horse MVP candidate at this point. They also have the other winger that they just signed,
Gabriel Peck. Yeah,
Gabriel Peck. Yes. So this is still a very offensively powerful team. That said, Ricky Puig, there just isn't a lot of. We don't know what this team looks like without him, because he has played all but 1 minute, and he is, kind of a lot of their offense runs through him.
Yeah, that's going to be the real question. He rightfully pulls the strings in this attack. Like what else would you rather do? You'd be hard pressed to find a team in MLS that wouldn't like to be able to just get him the ball and let guys run in front of him. That's what this team is built around. So losing him for the match does complicate a lot of things. And to your point, they've functionally not played without him this season. Last season, when he missed some time, they went to a 3 at the back a few times, which is something they finished the season with, mostly for other, nonsensical squad reasons. They just didn't have a squad that made sense. So they were playing 3 at the back, and they would bring Fagundes in and kind of use him. But then he had more help on the side because you had real wing backs. And so there isn't really a clear idea or model for what Greg Vanney's going to do with Puig out. It's going to hurt a lot. There's no way you can work around that and have it not hurt a lot. I think Fagundes in Puig's spot still makes the most sense, but that's me playing manager, not knowing what Greg Vanney's going to do.
Do you think they could even go to some sort of formation change, or do you think they'll stick with the 4-3-3 here?
I think they're going to stick 4-3-3. Vanny has loved that for as long as he's been a manager. And even last season, when it became really clear that they were better with 3 at the back, he fought that a lot. I don't think he wants to get out of that 4-3-3 unless he absolutely has to. And I don't think a single match of, Puig missing through yellow card accumulation is enough to force his hand on that.
And then at forward, last time, I believe it was who was it that
It was Barry last time, and it was also Miguel Barry. It was also Barry last week against Austin.
Okay, so Miguel Barry probably is the option. He's an interesting player. He has a handful of like really impressive highlights, but he has not been prolific by any stretch of the imagination.
No, he looks the part of a striker. He just lacks the putting the ball in the goal, which is a thing that you usually want from a striker. So he absolutely fills the general idea of what Greg Vanny wants. Like, you're like, hey, when we do this, you go here and then you do that and then you go there, and like he does all that. And there's just not a lot of it, and it's not just the goals. There's not a lot of chance creation either. It's not this is not a guy who's getting great chances and just skying them or had some bad luck. Everything, he helps in the buildup and he helps in the press. He just doesn't do a lot in front of the goal.
But you are expecting him to start.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of options there, and therein lies the problem. And it's something that I think they reasonably are putting off until the summer. The Galaxy are, but they really do need a backup striker for when Joveljic is out, and I think that's something you're going to see them target in August. And that's fine. We can muddle through this early part of the season without a backup striker that you really want. But there aren't a lot of options there. This is kind of what they got for now.
So given all this, do you think that we'll see a less aggressive attack? Like, is it any chance that the Galaxy are traditionally very ball dominant, but yet they also like to get out and transit? It's a powerful offense. They both like to possess the ball and go on these, direct attacks. That also ends up leaving them a little bit exposed. What would you imagine the approach is going to be here?
I think that they're going to try and do a lot of the same stuff. Greg Vanny, whether it's in formation or otherwise, is pretty stubborn. He wants to play his way. And sometimes that works out well and sometimes it doesn't. I think in general, this team can benefit from giving up some of the ball and dropping a little bit deeper and trying to limit a lot more of that transition to when they get the ball and trying to, lure teams forward and hit that space behind. I think that's a thing that would benefit the team, whether Puig is in, whether Joveljic is in, whoever it is. I think it's a thing that suits this team a little bit more. That's just not really how Greg Vanny wants to play. And it mostly works out with the first team. But, without this first team, you really got to make it count when you have the ball if you want to play this way. And we're going to find out if they can make it count without Puig and Joveljic. I'm inclined to think not.
Well, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball here. We didn't talk about this at all, so I'm taking a risk. But LA Galaxy 2 recently rebranded as Ventura County. They're having quite an MLS Next Pro season. What do you make of that change though? Is this something significant? Are the Galaxy sort of trying to expand the brand? Ventura County is not exactly, a distant place, but it is going the opposite direction of what they've done expansion wise previously, which was, maybe looking towards Orange County.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting move, and it's something that I think in a lot of ways makes a lot of sense. It's something to some degree I've wanted to see the Galaxy do for a while. And going down into Orange County, I think made a lot of sense for them. I thought growing their regional reach has always been a smart thing. They obviously, to some degree, poisoned the well in Orange County by, I don't really know how else to say it, being absolute dickheads to Orange County SC. So like that's a problem. They handled that really poorly. And they paid for it. Going up into Ventura County maybe wouldn't be exactly where I would choose. If I were them, I would head to, the San Fernando Valley. It's a massive, massive area that in a world where, there was more clubs, promotion, relegation, whether that's in soccer or baseball or basketball or football, name it. If it looked like most of the rest of the world, they would have a team out there in any sport. The Valley would all get behind them. The Valley is a massive area with a ton of people and be a great stronghold. I think getting into there would make a lot more sense for the Galaxy. I think that would make sense for LAFC. But, Ventura County is also a large place. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to grow the regional reach. You got to activate around it. You got to do a lot of meaningful things. To your point, Ventura County is a long ways from Carson. Orange County is much closer. Something in the South Bay like Long Beach would make more sense to that point too. I'm not sure how well it'll work, but I like the general idea behind it.
Yeah, I suppose, and presumably going head to head, and I don't even know if they're really going head to head with the Ventura County Fusion, who is technically even in a different part of Ventura County, but that would at least seem to be a much less of an obstacle than going head to head with Orange County SC, which is like much more of an established brand, which is putting out a pro, putting together a pro product and
yeah, they're very different. And to be fair, I do think there was a way to also coexist with Orange County SC and Orange County and be able to do that too. The club acted badly and poisoned that well, and so now they got to leave, and they have no one to blame but themselves. So what you gonna do? Sometimes you got to take your medicine.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. I think watching how MLS Next Pro sort of or how MLS navigates MLS Next Pro and the way that it chooses to compete with USL Championship and other leagues. It's going to be I don't mind this as a consumer of soccer. I think these sort of head to head battles, they feel uncomfortable a little bit, but maybe it's good. Maybe the competition is good. The way I look at it is, we have well over 100 professional teams in the United States now. I mean, think about when you and I first got into this, there may have been 20 professional teams. And that wasn't that long ago.
No, I mean, it's great that there are more clubs and they're in more cities. The worry that I have, and we'll see how it changes because we have MLS Next Pro now, but will there be an MLS 2? Will there be a lot of different ways in which this can grow? My worry is at some point and not really at some point, it happens in some areas now. Does MLS use their might and generally just their financial might or the concept of being a Division I league to crush and push out the entities that have built soccer in certain areas? And they've done it before, and they'll probably do it again. And that sucks. That sucks in a lot of ways, and it's a failure of the system. But I think in some of these situations, it does make a lot of sense to be like, hey, we're also going to play some soccer over here. And in the Galaxy's case, are you really just a reserve team playing over in this league? In which case, I think you're just, I think that is a healthy degree of like, yeah, you're growing your brand, but you're growing the sport in that area and you're giving more options versus, hey, we're planting a flag here so that way we can kick you out down the line when we're able to offer more by virtue of financial might and not really any actual on the ground work. That's kind of that's the dance that you're getting into there.
Yeah, and we're seeing that sort of play out in, to some degree, San Diego was like this, to some degree, maybe not to a greater quite that degree, but in Charlotte, we saw some, where a relatively small team got relatively pushed out by Charlotte FC. We're seeing it potentially in Indy, although who's leading that is a little unclear. It does seem like maybe the Indianapolis government or the mayor specifically has sort of made an executive decision about which league he wants to put his support behind.
Yeah, and then they're also getting into the real complication too of not just MLS versus MLS Next Pro versus insert other league here, but also various women's teams and various women's leagues, which creates a whole other thing, especially in these areas where they are sharing stadiums or who has ownership of stadiums. And are you coming in truly to be a partner in the sport in the city? Are you showing I think reasonable amount of respect to the other clubs and people who are involved in the sport in that city? I think that's where you're seeing San Diego FC step on rakes, which is not a surprise because they are led by Tom Penn, who, when he ran LAFC, couldn't stop stepping on rakes. But, that also throws another layer in there, too, of, if you are team good at the game isn't just for the men. And how do you interact with that as well? You're not just interacting up and down the pyramid, theoretically. You're also interacting with, the entire women's sport.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. It's going to be a fascinating next few years to see how this all kind of settles out. But Ryan, thank you once again for joining us. Of course, Ryan has been writing the Sounder at Heart tier rankings. He also does the power rankings at ESPN FC. And you can follow him on Twitter at Ryan Rosenblatt. Anywhere else people should be looking for your stuff?
Nah, I'm good. You guys can find me where you find me. Or don't. That's also probably a better idea.
Fair enough. Well, Ryan, thank you for joining us. This is Nos Larietes, and we will catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one.